Hey y'all, this is John McDuffie with North American Welding and Fabrication again, and I got a different one for you. Today I'm messing with a Komatsu PC 490, and somewhere right in that general area there's a small crack that the customer would like for me to fix. So in order to access said crack, I got to take that pin and that pin out. That'll free the bucket from the lower stick here. And then I take that pin there and that pin there, and the H-link comes off. Actually, I may be able to get away with just leaving that pin there in, but we'll find out. Anyways, I got to get all that stuff out of my way so I can maneuver this thing back into place and get to welding it up. Also, I spotted another crack way up in there. You can probably just barely see it, but it's there. So fun. Now, normally I'd just keep on whooping on these with a 14-pound hammer, but given the fact that I'm just about tired of beating on these with a 14-pound hammer, I'm going to come up with something a little different to get these pushed out to a lot easier way. This thing's in a little bit of a bind, and these pins ain't greased like they should have been, so I got to come up with something different. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this portable press that I made pretty much, and I'm going to weld this press. Let's see if I can show you here. Take the weld right along here, and then I'll stick my 20-ton bottle jack in the gap, put the end of the jack up against the pin, and use 20 tons of hydraulic pressure to press the pin out. Basically, the pin boss is going to be right here, and the jack is going to be between. Now, I got it all set up, and don't worry, you don't need a jack handle. As long as you got a good pair of vice grips, you'll be fine. But yeah, as you can see, this is working out a whole lot better than trying to kill myself with a 14-pound hammer and no drive pin and no help, all that good stuff. It's just walking that pin right on out of there, and I ain't even having to put any strain on this 20-ton jack, which is kind of handy because I didn't put a good weld on to hold this piece up, seeing as how I'm just gonna have to break it right back off and flip it around to do the other side. Now, as you can see, the bucket's off of it, and I went on ahead and pulled that H-link pin right there, but given the fact that the rest of the H-link is still hanging in my direct vision, and I don't feel like trying to strap it up somehow or another, I'm gonna pull that pin. That way it'll just be the cylinder there dangling, and then I can fully access the rest of this and start tweaking this thing around and getting it pulled back into place. The bucket was not fun to remove, but my 90-degree press arm and 20-ton bottle jack changed the mind of them pins. They decided they was in there forever until I talked them out of it. Anyways, I'm gonna get that pin out, and then I'm gonna find some way to get this boom, somewhat supported where I can mess with it without fear of it drooping down and getting me out of square or whatever. Now, I have made myself one sure enough grand mess all around Gurley, Alabama, and this here rock quarry. But I'm finally down to where I can actually have access to the problem. And for those of you who didn't know, I'm not actually supposed to be able to stick my hand almost all the way into this boom. That is a pretty large problem. Now I'm gonna fix it. Being that I got the bucket over here for a jack stand, and before anybody gets all worried and wanting to call the safety Nazis on me, don't worry. I done pressed down with the boom right there hard enough to get the front of the track so that 490 Komatsu to come off the ground, and this boom didn't fall off this bucket. It ain't going nowhere. Quit your crying. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do me some cleanup cutting here, and clean up cutting right through there, and get this thing pulled back here and up a little bit where I can get it pulled back and straight in, and you know, get this crack back up here where it used to be. Now I took one of the pins, stuck it somewhat in that hole, I hooked the strap and I come along and another strap to it and tied back there to the tie down point that no lowboy driver has ever used to tie a excavator down. Those are where you're supposed to tie them down, not over here on the track pads. Anyways, all that's irrelevant, nobody's listening. I'm gonna take that L-shaped bracket again, and I'm gonna weld it somewhere in this neighborhood here. Then I'm gonna stick my bottle jack right over here, and I'm gonna start jacking, and hopefully I'll be able to have that picked up where it's somewhat even with here again, and then I can release tension off my come along, and maybe the springiness of the steel will pull it back in somewhat where I can get a reposition and pull it back in the rest of the way. If what push comes to shove, I'll take that bucket tilt cylinder there and wrap a chain through the end of it and use the bucket tilt cylinder and the chain and a lot of stupid ingenuity, a lot of redneck ingenuity really, to make that happen. Yep, my little idea seems to be working pretty good. I'm gonna try to ease some tension off this come along here, because that little strap, I've been listening to it cry. I think the load rating's like 6,600 pound in choker, but I don't know, let's see. Choker's 5,000 pound, and this is supposedly 3,300 pound capacity, so I shouldn't be able to max that strap out, but I'm listening to it cry like it's the last button in Rosie O'Donnell's shirt. So we'll take some tension off of it and see what happens. Alright, I got pretty much all the juice off of it, but yeah, that's a problem. So I'm going to ease the tension off that jack now and re-weld the ever-living fire out of that, and put some more pressure on it with the jack and see what I can come up with then. Well, back out here again on this thing. Run out of daylight yesterday. Didn't really get a whole lot done after I finally got the bucket off. But anyways, I'm gonna do something different this time. I'm just gonna go on ahead and go from here down to wherever the crack stops down there, and just cut this son of a gun off with a torch. And then I'm gonna clean all this up, put me a plate here that sticks on down, and that way I can just go along through here, cut all that up, clean it up, and get it lined back up that way. Because trying to bend that plate there back around ain't gonna happen. It's about 1 inch thick, and yeah, it's a waste of time. Well, obviously things didn't go completely according to plan, but I backed up, punted, made a new plan, and now it's going according to that plan. don't know how good you can see, probably not good at all, but right off in there, yeah, you can see it. There's about center ways of the screen, there is a tube that goes from the center of that pin boss over to that wall. My original plan is I was going to take and cut right through here and do all that. Well, that tube is there for the grease to get to that pin. So, given that fact, if I did that, then I'd break that tube, and then I've got no way of reaching in there and reconnecting that tube, so I had to cut it where the tube could just stay with the boss. And now that that's cut, I'm going to take and get it to fall the rest of the way out of this boom, and then I can take my new plate here. It's going to be actually a reinforcement plate, but I can go on ahead and gouge that crack and gouge that crack, get them cleaned up and straightened up. Then I can put that new plate on here, get it welded, you know, somewhat, maybe just tack it to this section of the boom. Then I can use it as a tabletop when I roll this boom back in up under the track hoe. I can set this on said tabletop and get it cleaned up and ready to go, tack it up, weld it out. Then I'll make me another plate very similar to that one. Well, kind of similar, it'd be opposite. I'll take and round the ends of this so I'm not wasting so much material, and I'll make my other plate like that. I reckon now's about good a time as any to tell you that this is one of the not very well known disadvantages to doing stuff out in the field by yourself all the time. Obviously, with that plate in place, I'm not going to be able to get access to weld from here across through yonder because the plate's in my way. So for now, I'm just going to leave that plate tacked. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this boom around with the machine. Then I'll clean up the little piece that goes right here. That piece, yeah, that one. I'll clean that up, get it ready, flip it over, and I'll stick it on this plate, which it'll pretty much be using that plate for a table or a shelf. And then once I've got that, I can gouge out and V out all on the sides and all that, get it tacked up real good. And once I've got it tacked up properly, I'll take and get a grinder and a cutoff wheel in here and cut my tacks loose on this plate, pull this plate back off, gouge the main crack on the top and the bottom, weld them up, slick them back down, stick the plate back on, and then make my other plate for the other side. And yeah, once she's fully welded out, she'll be exactly where she's supposed to be, and everything will be reinforced. Anybody want to see a perfect example of a beautiful weld that didn't hold? There you go. That right there, come on camera, focus. That right there is the original weld that Komatsu put on this boom when they built it. I don't know how old that weld is, but I didn't cut the one off this side, but look here. This little fella right here, that's what that weld used to look like. It busted pretty much dead center of the weld that Komatsu put on there with their fancy little robot. So anybody that's on the internet and talking about, oh, if it's a pretty bead it'll hold, there's your proof. Pretty bead don't mean strong. Well, I successfully came up with a rigging system that was able to drag the broke piece all the way from over there to the back end of the welder beast all the way over here and then hang it and set it on my little plate shelf. But it's not exactly pulling back in perfect like it should, so I've got to do some trimming along both sides until this pin boss fits all the way back in this notch where it was. Wonderful. Well, I got rained out yesterday, but back out here again, and I've been out here all day, but anyways, getting this all gouged out real good, and I've done got a couple good tacks on it already. But once I got it tacked up good on each side, I'm gonna take and make sure that it's square with the bucket by almost reinstalling the bucket securement pin into this bottom hole on the pin on the lower stick here. And if it's good and square with the bucket, I'm gonna let her wobble. I know I ain't Andy or Andy's little homestead, but that's a good little saying, and I'm gonna use it. Anyways, that's what I'm working on right now. I'm waiting on my air compressor to build pressure back up so I can finish my gouging. And once I got it all gouged out, I'm gonna put a good root in it, and well, I'm gonna clean it up, then I'm gonna put a good root on it, check it with square on the bucket, make sure it's right. If all that passes and it's all good, I'm gonna let her eat. All right, now here we are. Just got done sticking the boom in there and making sure it's gonna fit and still be square. And yeah, the way it's sitting right now, the pin will go through it, but I ain't bothering to stick the pin through it because I got to take it back apart and weld all that up. But yeah, the bucket is now square with the boom again. That's a good thing. Now I can pull the boom back up out of that bucket and stick it back over here where I had it and get it preheated and weld it out. Now, while I'm waiting on this to get warm, I figure I'll just go on ahead and tell you a little bit about preheating. You want to get it at least warm enough to where if you spit on it, your spit just sizzles and boils off real quick like. Right around 350 degrees is ideal, but I keep forgetting to put my little temperature thing in the truck, so I just spit on it, and if the spit sizzles, I'm good. Also, when you're using a rosebud and acetylene for your fuel gas to do your preheating, you want to make sure that your regulators are set properly. You don't want your acetylene regulated pressure to be above 7 psi. Also, you want to run the correct size rosebud for the bottle that you're using, because too big of a rosebud will pull too much out of an acetylene bottle, and next thing you know, you're getting liquid, and the liquid makes big explosions, and it's just a very bad day for everybody involved. All that being said, I'm gonna get all this warmed up, and once it's warmed up, I'm gonna go on ahead and get busy welding. All right, that side is plenty hot enough to get started on it now, so I'm gonna move my rosebud and my chair that I'm using for a stand over to the other side so it can be preheating while I start welding this side up, and everything will stay nice and warm, and yeah, good stuff. completely out of oxygen now. So that figures. Yeah, ran completely out of oxygen. Some of y'all, maybe two of you, might be wondering, what's the point in preheating? Well, you don't want your material that you're welding on to cool off too quickly once you're done welding on it. If the metal cools off too quick when you stop welding, then it can suck the heat out of your bead and it'll make your weld more brittle and it'll be easier for your weld to break, basically is what I'm saying. So you want your metal to cool down a whole lot slower than it would with the ambient temperature of the atmosphere in this area right now being about 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Freedom units. I don't know what that computes to in communist, but I'm in America, so we deal with freedom units. Get this extra bottle unstrapped and get started changing it out. Then I can get my preheat back going. Well, I'm back out here again, and I have made a little adjustment in my preheating schedule. I stopped off at Northern Tool and grabbed one of them knockoff Tiger torches and a little 20-pound propane tank. And this is by far much, much better than preheating with an acetylene rosebud. Now, I got both sides together good enough to where I ain't got to worry about them running off and leaving. So I pulled that plate back off, and now I've got to address that gap and its ugly cousin, that gap, that one right there. And yeah, for some reason I got water running out of the boom, and it's coming from up high somehow. That's not making any sense, but that's what's going on. Anyways, I'm gonna get the arc gouger out and widen each one of these cracks up some, where I can get in there and really put in a full 100% full penetration 6010 root, and then I'll finish it all out with 7018, and yeah, we'll go from there. Fun. Remember what I said about the preheat, how you can spin on it and make sure it's right? Well, I stopped welding on this, took me a little bathroom break, and now check this out. See how it just runs down there in balls? Preheat's right. Well, I've been dodging rain all this week, but I managed to get that plate on and get it welded out today. I got to hit that little area there with a grinder. That's where I had to have a plate dog push that plate down. But yeah, now that plate's on and done. All I got to do now is flip the boom back around and make up the other plate out of that piece of flat bar there. Once that's done, I can put that other plate on, weld it out. I'm gonna add some more weld on the sides around that boss and over here where I had to cut it. And then once all that's done, I can put the bucket back on and they can go tear it up again. All right, y'all, here we go. Got the second plate laid out, saving as much material as I can. I made this one a foot longer than the other one, and as you can see, instead of it coming to a point in the center, it's going to come to two separate points on each side, and that's about as good as I can figure a way to do it. I ain't no structural engineer or anything like that, but I fixed enough track hole booms to know that you definitely don't want it cut straight square, because when it goes to breaking, and it will, it'll break directly at the end of whatever you put on it because you cut it off square. This makes it a hard transition, again, from stuff that's an extra ½ inch thick down to missing an extra ½ inch. So you taper all the way out to a rounded end. You don't want a hard end on it at all, and that's about your best shot at it never breaking ever again. All right, y'all, finally got all the plates on it. The lower part of this is all welded up and good. Already got that crack there gouged out. Now I'm gonna clean it up, throw some 1/8 inch 6010 in the stinger, get a seal bead on it, get a decent little root. Then I'm gonna switch over to 1/8 inch 7018, fill it up. Once all that's done, I can put this thing back together. Well, to all two of you who stuck around long enough to watch this disaster completely unfold, it's done. Bucket's back on it, squared up, all nice and goodly like. I had all kind of trouble getting that pin to turn, so I ended up welding a piece of plate to it and putting a pipe wrench to it, and then hooking that to the back end of the truck and using a 1.5 ton chain come along to make it happen, but it happened. Anyways, they can come in here tomorrow and pump about 25 gallons of grease in there, or not, probably not, and yeah, they can go back to running this thing. I did, you can't hardly see it, but I did hit that crack way up there and got it done. Now I got about 14 tons of my tools everywhere that I gotta pick up and put back on the truck so I can go home. There's some over here, some over there. There's some drop plate that I gotta grab, trash, more tools, drive pins and accessories, pieces of wood that I really want to keep, sockets, roll up my leads, sort through all that mess. Yeah, I'll be here for a minute, but it's done.